Hello everyone, yes, another video. That's incredible on this sleeping channel to have another video so quickly after the one I did, but the previous one I did was only in French because it was for French a Hong Kong Film Festival in France, so I felt like I had to do a video in English soon enough, and so I took the opportunity of the release by Shoot Factory of the A Better Tomorrow trilogy with an object of attention, that is the Workprint of A Better Tomorrow 2, which has been discovered by Shoot Factory. Maybe you remember that a few months ago or last year, I don't remember anymore, I did a video about the midnight screening version of Bullet in the Head, the very famous John Woo film, which had been shown at the Hong Kong Film Archive back then. So there were actually, if you have seen the previous video I did on that, there were actually not many difference between the cinema version and this midnight screening version. But the A Better Tomorrow, the Workprint, is much more interesting when it comes to the difference about the editing between the cinema version and this original cut. So a little bit of context. So Shoot Factory, as you may know, has managed to ink a deal with the right holder from the Golden Princess catalog, which has many films from the Cinema City or Film Workshop from the 80s. And so the holy grail of this series of films were, of course, the John Woo films, the A Better Tomorrow trilogy, directed by John Woo and Choi Ark, The Killer, Hardball, those kind of films. And so they've recently released the A Better Tomorrow trilogy, and they managed to locate what is the workprint of A Better Tomorrow 2. You may remember that the production of A Better Tomorrow 2 was not a walk in the park, far from it. It was a difficult film to create from the beginning to the end, for the very first reason that they didn't plan to have any sequel originally, and it's the success of A Better Tomorrow first one and the difficulty of some other productions by Film Workshop around that time, which led to the making of this A Better Tomorrow 2. They had a lot of difficulty to come up with a story which would be satisfying for all the artists involved, and there were also the start of a diverging opinion between John Woo and Choi Ark about what should be done on this series. So that led to a difficult shoot. They also had what was customary back then in the Hong Kong film industry. They had a release date already planned, and so they had to make sure that the shooting was done quickly enough in order for the film to be released at the date which had been set a few months before. So that created another pressure and another difficulty creatively for John Woo and his team to make the film the way they wanted. And so at the end, according to John Woo, he had a director's cut which was around 2 hours 40 minutes long, which was obviously way too long because back then in the Hong Kong film industry, it was fairly normal to have a film around 90 minutes long. So they had to cut a lot, and once again they were under a lot of pressure to cut quickly enough in order to accommodate the release date. And so they did manage, but they ended up with a version which was around 1 hour 45 minutes long. So they had to cut almost 1 hour of material. And of course, when you are a fan of Hong Kong cinema, that's the kind of thing which makes you fantasize a bit. You wonder, oh, what was this 2 hour 40 minute version? It must have been much better than the cinema version as we know it, especially because John Woo himself was saying that this original cut was more interesting, with characters more developed on more like an opera of gangsters, something much more ambitious than the final result. But of course, we had no idea to know, because as that was the case back then, the filmmakers, the producers didn't keep trace of the original edits, and so this mythical 2-hour 40-minute long version of A Better Tomorrow was considered lost forever. So Shout Factory, thanks to them, they managed to locate actually a print of this version, which was stored at the Hong Kong Film Archive. It was actually mislabeled, but they did the effort, and really thanks to them, because I know from a personal point of view that dealing with the Hong Kong Film Archive is not easy, but they put the effort, and they were rewarded, and we are rewarded as well by finally being able to see this Workprint version, which is not the original director's cut by John Woo, because it's about 20 minutes less than what John Woo was talking about. So we have here a 2-hour 20-minute long roughly version, but that's already much more than the cinema version, and that already gives us an idea of how was the original cut. So in my case, when I finally was able to watch this version, I do remember quite well A Better Tomorrow 2, but not to the extent that I can immediately notice some of the differences between the two versions. So what I did is that I actually played both versions at the same time in order to see what had been changed, what had been added, or what had been cut from the Workprint to the cinema version. So of course I took notes when I was doing so, and I ended up with a document which is 4 pages long. So that's quite a lot of change, but it's a lot of minor change, in the sense that the structure of the cinema version and the Workprint version is basically exactly the same. You have the same scenes in the same order, the same character, the same story. Really, it's basically the same film. One of the main differences is that there are a lot of scenes in the Workprint are longer than in the cinema version, and it's longer by just a few seconds there and there for the most part, in the sense that a lot of what has been cut are longer introduction of a sequence and also longer ending of a sequence. So if we take, for example, the ball scene when Dean Sheck is accompanying his daughter Regina Kent to this ball, we see a few more shots of Dean Sheck and Regina Kent with the guest chit-chatting, this kind of thing. So nothing really very important, but it makes you enter into the scene in a fairly more, in a bit of smoother way compared to the more abrupt cinema version. When Leslie Cheung goes to the villa of the bad guy in order to spy on them, there is a moment where you see him on his motorbike and he's preparing for it. So it's a lot of this kind of starting of a scene and ending of the scene with just a few seconds there and there. In the same spirit, you have a lot of dialogues, a lot of small lines of dialogues which have been removed in the cinema version. But most of them are not critical, in the sense that they don't really change for the most part the meaning or the understanding of the scene. It's quite often an information which is repeated again, which you had already had been conveyed in the scene, but which is emphasized a bit more. For example, in the scene where Ken Cherian-Fat is trying to bring back Dean Sheck to sanity by having him eating an orange, you have Ken who say, come on baby, come on baby. Well, in the cinema version he says it 1 or 2 times, and in the Workprint version he says it 3 or 4 times. It's exactly the same thing, but it's just longer. And there are a lot of this kind of dialogues there and there, in the Workprint version compared to the cinema version. So all this is interesting, but it's not really making a big impact on the film itself. But we also have two scenes which had been completely cut from this Workprint to give birth to the cinema version. And we had actually some clue in the original trailer. There are one or two shots of the first scene which had been cut, which you can see in the trailer, but you could not see in the cinema version. So now we finally have the full scene in this Workprint. And the first one is when Leslie Cheung is trying to convince the criminals that he's one of them and he wants to join them. He comes up during a gunfight between the two gangs, and he helps the one which is led by Xing Fuan, and he managed to convince them to work with him, even if he is an undercover cop. Well, in the cinema version, the scene basically ends like this. Leslie Cheung proposed to join the criminals, and Xing Fuan seems interested by the proposition. But actually there is a whole sequence which follows this scene in the Workprint version, where you can see that Xing Fuan actually doesn't trust Leslie Cheung at all, and Leslie Cheung is being beaten up by Xing Fuan and his men to force him to confess that he is actually an undercover cop. And this scene is interesting because for several reasons. First, visually it's actually pretty good. The scene is shot in abandoned factory, and it has this vibe, very gritty, a bit new wave, end of the 70s, early 80s visual, which I think works very well for Hong Kong film of that time, on this type of film, gangster films of that time. So that makes for an interesting look, and also because the way John Woo directs the scene is also quite interesting. There are some very nice shots. One shot where the camera is over Leslie Cheung and is being he receives a punch, an uppercut from Xing Fuan, and you see him in slow motion like this with the blood splashing. I mean, it's really nice. I mean, that we are talking about the John Woo from the second half of the 80s. So John Woo at his best, in my opinion. And he has this kind of beautiful shots there and there in this scene. There is also some kind of prototype of the scene from Hard Boiled, when Tony Leung Chiu-wai has to kill his former boss, gang boss, and then he passed by Anthony Wong. He smiled at him, and then after he changed his expression. There is a similar setup. It's not as deep as in Hard Boiled, but there is a similar setup which is being used here by John Woo. So for this reason, this scene is actually quite interesting, but it doesn't change fundamentally the story itself. It just shows that Xing Fuan and the others, they are kind of doubting the honesty of Leslie Cheung, which will lead to him being executed later. But we don't really need this scene to understand that configuration. But still, interesting addition in this Workprint. And the other scene which was completely missing in the cinema version, it's a bit later in the film when Leslie Cheung and the other heroes, Ti Lung, Din Chek, Chow Yun Fat, decide to kidnap the gangster, the foreign gangster, the American gangsters, played by Ken Boyle, in order to gather more information about the gang operated by Kwan San. And so in this case, what happens in this scene is that so Leslie Cheung kidnap Ken Boyle. He brings him in another abandoned factory. There are a lot of cops around them, so he kidnaps him, but makes him believe that it's done with the benediction of the Hong Kong police, and then he put some kind of explosive device on him, and then they free him, and he led them to Quan Chan's villa, and so they are able to see what's going on between those two gangs and the general dynamic, the location, everything. So this scene kind of justify how they managed to gather some information about what's going on between the two gangs and what is the plan of Quan Chan. But my impression is that it has almost a comedic feel to it, because actually the cops which are present during the scene are not cops, they are taxi drivers who have been brought by Kenneth Tsang in order to pretend being cops. And the whole setup with the explosive device, it's almost played for laugh. So I don't think it fits very well with the mood of the film, but well, to be fair, A Better Tomorrow 2 has a lot of problems of different style depending on which character you are following. So it's not really surprising to have this kind of tone, but I don't think it plays for the best when it comes to the film itself. So that's really the two main scenes. But what I found the most interesting discovery in the Workprint is how it changed the dynamic of some of the most interesting scenes from A Better Tomorrow 2. And in my opinion, one of the best scenes from A Better Tomorrow 2, it's when Ti Lung has to shoot Leslie Cheung in order to convince Quan Chan that he is one of them. This scene works very well in the cinema version, but actually the dynamic in the Workprint is different. In the cinema version, what is very impactful in a way is that when Quan Chan asked Ti Lung to shoot Leslie Cheung, he decided to do it very quickly. So you are kind of surprised. There is an impact through the speed to which the events happen, and of course the dramatic factor of having the elder brother having to kill his little brother. So it works pretty well in the cinema version, but actually in the Workprint version there is a much longer build-up. You really see Ti Lung hesitate a lot before shooting at Leslie Cheung, and so it makes the scene in a way more dramatic compared to the cinema version, which is very sudden. And what ends up convincing Ti Lung to do it, it's actually because Xing Fuan is very close to himself shoot Leslie Cheung, so he understands that he has to do it himself anyway in order to convince them that he is part of the gang. So this new version, I think both versions works, both versions are interesting, but the Workprint version plays to the strength of John Woo, this kind of mellow dramatization, but in the best sense possible. So I thought that was very interesting to see how this scene had been originally built, and it works pretty well. Another thing which I found very interesting, it's of course the ending. Of course, that's the most memorable part of A Better Tomorrow 2. That's basically this huge gunfight with our 4 heroes, 4 or 5, depending if you count Kenneth Tsang, against this army of gangsters. Incredible scene, which kind of save and makes the viewing of A Better Tomorrow 2 worth, even if there are some shortcomings on some other aspects. And I was actually surprised to realize that this scene was extended, was longer in the Workprint compared to the cinema version. And I was surprised because usually the practice back then in the Hong Kong film industry was that when you had to shorten a film, you kept the action scene intact and you were cutting mostly in the drama. So that's what I expected on this A Better Tomorrow 2 Workprint. But surprisingly, this incredible final action scene is longer in the Workprint version. And they extended the part of one of my favorite characters of the film, which is this elite killer with a sense of honor, this proto-mad dog from Hardboiled, played by Lung Min Sang. And actually, in this Workprint version, you see him fight against Tilung. He has a sword fight against Tilung. So when I realized that, until then, I thought it was interesting, but I was more watching the differences between the two versions as from an analytical point of view. But when I saw this extended action sequence, I was, wow, that's incredible. I really didn't expected it, and I was very happy to discover it. Especially also because back then we are talking about Hong Kong cinema from around 1988. So that was a time where the action scenes were incredible. So we have this fight, which is quite short, between Tilung and Lung Min Sang, is very well choreographed, very well shot. So it's a delight to discover. And to make things even better, there is also this very famous sequence of this very famous duel between Chow Yun-fat and Lung Min Sang at the end of the sequence. And this duel is actually much longer in the Workprint version. There is a more interesting build-up before they finally shoot each other. So that was also a very interesting and very pleasant discovery. So my conclusion on this Workprint version is that, of course, it's a pleasure to be able to discover this extended version of A Better Tomorrow 2, and I can only advise you to have a look at it, especially if you like to a certain degree the sequel of A Better Tomorrow. It's certainly a must-watch, but my conclusion is a bit more nuanced, I would say, in the sense that I come up from this Workprint version thinking that this original 2 hour 40 minutes director's cut by John Woo is probably not the incredible film that I could have fantasized before. I think we have basically the same film in the Workprint, in the cinema version, and probably in this original director's cut as well, which is a film with a lot of very strong scenes, but a lot of problems as well, with some characters, performances, and scenes which are a bit too over the top. I'm thinking mostly the scenes with Din Shek and Chow Yun-fat in the US, which really drag the film down, in my opinion. And so they are still there. They're actually longer in the Workprint. And so for me, this Workprint is the plus version of the cinema. So it makes what the good point of the cinema version even better with this Workprint version, but it makes also the drawbacks, the weaker point of this film even weaker in its Workprint version. So it's a plus on every level of the film. And I come back, as I said, from this viewing experience with the idea that the original cut was probably similar. It was as good and as bad as the final version that we ended up having. But it's still a very interesting experience watching this Workprint. And we can have a rough idea of what is missing. So we still have a roughly 20 minutes missing. When I had the pleasure to interview John Woo, and I asked him about what was missing from his original cut, he told me that the relationship between Chow Yun-fat and the American cop was a bit more developed. There is indeed one scene here which is present in the Workprint where we see the two characters interact further. I'm guessing that in the original version maybe there were a few more scenes of those guys together, and we can also have an idea of what was cut from the trailer, because there is an old sequence in the trailer where you see Ken Chow Yun-fat trying to bring back Din Shek to sanity using a bird, so not food as it is the case in the film or in the Workprint, but using a bird to try to bring him to a normal life, and this sequence was probably in the original director's cut of John Woo. But I don't think they would have changed drastically the film as we know it, or really made it that much better compared to either the cinema version or the Workprint version. So big thanks to Shout Factory for having made the effort to locate this Workprint and make it accessible to all of us. It's a real gift for Hong Kong film fans. Let me also add a few words about the general tone and my own opinion about the release of those films by Shout Factory. Of course, I'm very pleased to see those films being released and being treated with all the care that it deserves. I was never worried about having those films disappeared. I mean, there were those kind of words on the internet, people fearing that those films would never be released. I was never worried about that. I was sure that some kind of deal would be found one way or another. So of course the earlier the better, so that's great to see it finally released. Disclaimer, I actually approached Shout Factory when I learned about this agreement to inform them that I had some material I could provide them when it came to interviews and that they could include on their release. They never replied to me. I never got any answer to my contact, and they went on their own way. From what I can see, they decided to produce those special features by themselves internally. That's their choice. But I must confess the final result is a bit of a mixed bag, in the sense that they did a good job, I think, on the John Woo release. They managed to get all the most interesting people they could get, so kudos to them. But I'm less thrilled about some of the other releases. They did some great work sometimes. For example, on City on Fire, they managed to locate one of the original scriptwriter. That's not something which is easy to do, and I know it very well because I've been doing it for years. Sometimes to locate some of those people who have disappeared from the Hong Kong film industry for years, it's a real pain in the ass, but they managed to do that, for example, with City on Fire, so really great job there. But for example, on Peking Opera Blues, I'm less thrilled in the sense that they managed to get some technicians. Why not? I mean, that's interesting to hear. I'm very happy that they managed to get them. But they didn't get some of the most important personalities who have worked on the film. People like Choi Ark, people like the scriptwriters or the action directors, and that's the kind of things which I could have actually provided to them. So there is a bit of frustration for me as an audience with some of those special features, and of course as an interviewer, on I'm not sure how you call it, content creator, writer, whatever, because I thought there could have been some work done together there. But anyway, that's how it is. But it's great in any case that those films are released in good conditions. And also, just a last word, because that will be clearly my last video for the year. I'm glad to announce that my translation of Choi Ark, The Chaos Theory, so my biography of Choi Ark, published in French a few years ago, is finally over. It's an updated version with his latest film, with additional interviews compared to the version I had released a few years ago. So it's all ready. I mean, it can be published whenever a publisher in English is interested. But I must confess that I'm starting to discover the publishing world in the English-speaking countries, and I'm not very impressed, actually. I realized that for the most part, most of the publishing house in the UK, the US, Australia, they are very, very mainstream. There are very few small publishing houses specializing in cinema or subjects which are a bit more niche. And that's a surprise for me, because actually in France we have a very active ecosystem when it comes to books, so I had no such problem. So I started to send some proposition for the publication in English of Chariarch, the Chaos Theory. So far, no positive reply, but I will keep going. If you know some publishing house in your country which could be interested to release the book, don't hesitate to write it in the comment or contact me on any social media or whatever way you can get in touch with me. That will always help in getting the book published, which I'm proud to say is the most definitive version of Chariarch filmography put into a book version. Anyway, so that's the end for my self-promotion, and that's the end for this video when it comes to Better Tomorrow 2, the Workprint version. I wish you all great and celebrations, Christmas, Happy New Year, and I hope to see you again next year. Until then, take care.